Okay, I can see it. Okay, great.
Okay.
Is there feedback?
I'm not hearing feedback now.
Okay.
I just heard that. I don't know if you just, is it coming back from the YouTube? There's probably a delay to the YouTube channel, and you have the YouTube channel open.
Yes, but I need to have it open in order to see the comments.
Oh, I see. Are we broadcasting live right now?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So, well, I can work through it if you can work through it.
As can I. We're going to.
Why not?
Hey, everybody. Welcome to Nanny Chats. If you do not know, we are a community of nannies and leaders and experts answering common and uncommon questions. And so today we have the phenomenal Warren Berger as our guest. And he was a trader on Wall Street for 27 years. And he has come on our show today to talk to us about budgeting, savings, as well as debt. So without further ado, Warren Berger.
Hi, Brittany. Thank you very much for having me. I'm really happy to be here today. I know we had a couple of technical difficulties, but I think we're working through them as best we can. So this is the
Absolutely.
world we
Thank you
live
for
in now.
hanging in
So
there with me.
so I originally worked on Wall Street. I ran trading desks for like you said 27 years. And I found as I was kind of nearing the end of that career, looking to do something different, I had spent a lot of time, helping friends and family through their personal finances, and got more and more interested in it as an industry. A couple of years ago, I started my own financial advisory firm, and started working friends, family, colleagues, and others. And uh, interestingly enough, I ended up stumbling upon the nanny industry, which now seems to be taking quite a hold in my business. And so we're servicing a number of nannies across the country. And it was funny how it originally started. My wife and I have 12 and 14-year-old daughters, and when they were younger, we employed a nanny. She lives in New York City now. She's part of our family. It's been a few years since she's actually been worked with us as a nanny, but she stayed on as part of our family essentially. So she, talks to my wife probably once or twice a month, and the kids look at her as a mentor. And she came back to me years later and asked me if I would take her on as an advisory client. And that was my first sort of look into the world of nannies and how their finances look, and some of the challenges and advantages that there are that come with being a nanny. And through her, she's a nanny for a very wealthy uh, family in Manhattan. And she started introducing me to some of her colleagues. And so all of a sudden, I started bringing on these clients that were nannies, and started to realize that this is a really underserved community by my industry, the financial advisory industry. And it's just become interesting. There's a few different pitfalls that nannies can fall into. They're not really pitfalls, but challenges that nannies have when it comes to their finances that it's fairly distinct for nannies. So I'm learning more and more about the industry and about some of those solutions as we deal with more of these nannies, and it's been great. It's been a nice experience.
I think that it's incredible that you began with your nanny and that she felt comfortable enough to come back and just get advice from you. And so that sort of speaks volumes. I'm grateful that you're a part of the nanny community now.
It's great, and it's not. I had never really had anticipated it, but it just seems to have steamrolled. And so I recently just set up a course for the U.S. Nanny Institute in personal finance for nannies. And I do have an article coming out in the next issue of Nanny Magazine. So I'm getting more and more interested in the topic, and it seems like more people come to me with questions. So it's fun.
Definitely, there is a need. So, a few nannies sent me a couple of messages or questions that they had for you.
Okay.
Um, so, Jada Rashawn asks, why should we create a spending plan or budget? And what should be included in this budget?
So that's a great question. So, of course, this will be a slightly long answer because I love to talk. But
Bring it on.
yeah, so basically, creating a spending plan and budgeting is really the foundation for any holistic financial plan that you're going to create in your life. So, like for instance, our process always starts, and I know Brittany, you and I had a conversation like this, where I really delve deep into sort of your personal ideas and ideals about finance, as well as your sort of personal story and your goals. And the idea is that if you start trying to budget and create a personal spending plan, but you don't really know what you're doing it for, you end up, if you don't have those goals articulated, you really it's very difficult to put a plan in place because you don't even know what the goals are. You have them in your head, but you've never put them down on paper. If you've never articulated them, so what happens is it becomes kind of a blurred view of how much should I be saving versus how much should I be spending if you haven't really clarified what you're saving for in the first place. And so we always go through the idea of setting goals and looking at ideas about how you view money and how you spend. And then getting into the budgeting and spending, that really becomes the foundation for any other planning that comes afterwards. Because the fact is, until you've established how much money you have coming in versus how much you have going out, and then how much you're willing to use for your discretionary spending versus savings, that's going to determine how much you have left over to invest, or how much you have left over for saving for a house, or these kinds of things. So spending and budgeting become that basis for all of the other financial decisions that you make in your life. And it sounds simple, but and it really is a simple concept.
Mhm.
It's assessing how much money is coming in versus going out. But the fact is that there's so much emotion that comes into play when it comes to personal finance, that it's, that concept, while it's easy to understand, is a lot harder to implement. And that's why we try to work on an ongoing basis, trying to serving as sort of an accountability coach as we work through these sort of budgeting and cash flow processes.
And you mentioned something that really hit home for me, and it was that this process can be an emotional one. It's something that you actually have to delve deep into, because that is why I actually felt comfortable with you. We had a consultation, and you asked really thoughtful questions about, like, you know, why do I want to spend the money where I want to spend it? And kind of just the mindset that I have behind spending money, which then which really freed me up and allowed me to go, oh, okay.
Great. Yeah, sure.
these are my spending habits, and this is why, and this is what drives the way that I spend. Maybe I could cut back here or put more into this. So that's
Well, I'm glad that you had that experience, but and the idea is, and we talked about this a little bit, it's about becoming mindful about your spending. And I think so many of us, we have a general idea of how much money is coming in versus how much money is going out, but until we've had a really thoughtful look at it, it's very hard to get a handle on it. And what happens is these emotions come into play. So how much of your spending is compulsive spending that you're feeling guilty about, and or how much of your spending is on things that you don't necessarily need in your life and that don't advance you towards the goals that are actually really important to you. And that goes back to sort of articulating those goals, right? Until you know what's really important to you, it's hard to decide, well, what am I willing to give up in order to make those goals happen? And so there's the whole idea of budgeting and spending. It's all about trade-offs, right? So you can turn around and you work hard for a living and you can spend money however you like. But there's ultimately the bills that have to get paid, and that's going to have to happen. But then there's that sort of amorphous, needs area where you can decide about whether you're going to spend money on going out to dinner or taking a trip, or are you going to save for a house or to save to start a business and these kinds of things. And that's why sort of getting deep into articulating your goals and what you really want to achieve in your life, it ends up coming back to sort of your day to day, where you say, hey, is this part of my spending plan? And is this really moving me towards what's most important in my life? And that mindfulness of sitting back and saying, hey, I'm gonna take a breath before I make that Amazon purchase or whatever it is that has you, Yeah. Well, me too. I mean, it's for everybody, right? No one has this perfect. And when it comes to budgeting, I always really try to start from a place of being kind to ourselves. I think so often everyone beats themselves up for their past actions because they should have been doing things a certain way. And when I start to work with people, I look at the past as sort of to gain an understanding of what we may need to change and things like that. But I don't use it as a tool to sort of, beat up on yourself because it's not helpful. Once you've made the decision to move forward with your personal finances, everything else starts from there. It starts today and it's looking at your future. So looking back at past mistakes or things that you wish you had done differently, not only is it not helpful, but it actually defeats the purpose of the process, which is to be kind to yourself and to really spend on the things that are important. And when you are spending in a mindful way, to do that, like pat yourself on the back, like, hey, I budgeted for these clothes that I am buying. And so I don't have to worry about whether I should or I shouldn't have, because I know that that's part of my plan. And so I'm going to really enjoy this purchase, or I'm going to really enjoy this shopping trip because it's exactly what I want to be doing.
Yes, I love that. Just being thoughtful and more importantly, not having guilt, because if you come from a place of guilt, like it's not going to be a fun experience.
My brother told me once, guilt is a useless emotion. and
It is.
I think it is. I just think we spend so much time, just trashing ourselves yeah, okay, we all make mistakes. The key is to recognize the fact that maybe things haven't been going the way that you want them to, and start to implement the change that you would like to see.
Absolutely. We can all attest to that, right, nannies? Grace. We have to have grace with our kiddos. They get second chances. And so we may as well give ourselves second chances too. So there are a few more questions in the budgeting department.
Great.
And the Nanny National, she asked, should we track all of our spending? And if so, are there any apps or anything that you recommend to track them?
So another great question, and absolutely. And so this is part of that, being mindful about your spending. So I look at budgeting, really it's budgeting and cash flow are the terms that we use for this. And cash flow represents the past essentially. And it's that, what are your spending patterns? What have they been? And so analyzing your cash flow is looking at how much money has been going in, looking at how much money goes out and where it's been going to, right? And then once you've established that, now you can start to set budgets, right? And I'm getting back to the question in terms of apps and how to do that. But I first want to start with saying, when creating that budget, you really want to break it down. It's simple in concept. It's needs, wants, and savings, right? What are your needs? The needs are the things that you have to pay. That's your mortgage or rent, your car payment, your utility bills, those things that are going to have to be paid monthly and that aren't an option to think about. Yeah. Your wants, that's the part where you have the most control over. These are the things that bring you, what you really want to do is try to pay attention. What is it that's bringing joy in your life? And that might be going out to dinner with friends. It certainly is for me, but to what extent are you doing that? Or it might be buying clothes. You've worked really hard. You deserve to buy clothes. Are you buying? Are you spending within the realm that you want to be spending it? And so that's where you have to really sit down and analyze those needs, because anything that's left over from the needs and the wants is your savings. And the savings are what are being applied to your medium and long-term goals in your life.
Mhm.
So to the extent that you can limit those wants to the things that actually bring you joy. And I don't think many people have sat down and looked at what they've spent in the past and said, hey, does that bring me joy? And it doesn't have to be some big, joyful event. It could be a really small thing, but does it have meaning to you? And the idea is that money is just this tool. And so if we can use it in a meaningful way to what's most important, and we've grown up with so many habits, spending habits, or we're also barraged by advertising, or we're looking at friends that have things and we're like, oh, we want that next thing or that next technology or that piece of clothing or whatever it is. And we have to get away from that mindset, because the fact is it's going back into yourself, and it's part of this like personal financial wellness of like, what is the healthiest thing for me to be spending on that makes me feel good and leaves me without debt? So I just like to highlight that first. But getting back into tracking spending, there's quite a few apps out there. A couple that I really like are Mint. Is one app. It's a free app, and it allows you to link your accounts, and you can track spending, and you can actually split accounts. So if you have a certain bill that came up on a bank account and it was for two different things, you can split those accounts.
Okay.
There's another app called You Need a Budget, which is a paid app, and that is more of a zero-based budgeting. So what they're doing is accounting for tracking every dollar that comes in and out of your account. There's a certain commitment you just have to sort of buy into the philosophy, but it's quite good for some people work differently. So some of these systems will work better for others, and so it's worth taking a look and experimenting a little bit. I also, Brittany, I provided you with a link if you'd like to give it out to anybody who's interested. We're offering for free through our software you can link your accounts, and you can set up a budgeting and your net worth and things like that. And if anyone's interested, they're welcome to sign on, and then I would just follow up and send you an email to just explain how it works. So those are three things that you could look at. But yeah, tracking your spending is the most important.
Okay. And actually, let me get that link. It's
kind of a long link, so
we will leave the link down in the comments. How about that?
Sure.
Okay. And thank you for that information. We always want or need like just somewhere to start, and so those sound like really good options. Also, and from the the National Nanny, she asked, Dave Ramsey considers credit cards bad. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think bad or good isn't necessarily the way that I would describe credit cards. Credit card debt, excessive credit card debt is bad. There's no question about that. You're usually paying very high interest rates, and it detracts from your overall financial wellness. Okay. Now, credit cards as a tool, as a mindful tool, I don't have a problem with. If you're using them to spend, but I always encourage everyone, pay that credit card down every month. So if you needed to buy, because we live in a lot of cashless environments now. So, using a credit card is fine. Just make sure it's mindful, make sure it's part of your spending plan, and that you're paying it off. And now when it comes to paying off your credit card, there's a couple of different philosophies that I wish I had coined, but they're not my ideas, but they work. And I use them with my clients a lot. And they're called the avalanche method and the snowball method of paying down credit card debt. And I don't know if you've heard of that before at all. So I figure it's worth just mentioning to any nannies that might be listening. And the avalanche method means that you take your highest interest rate credit cards, and you pay them down first with as much money as you're able to afford to pay, while still paying the minimum payment on any other credit cards you have. Right. And that method is actually the faster way to pay it down, from a mathematical perspective. But the snowball method, sometimes people feel more emotionally connected to, and that is paying down your lowest balance credit card first, while paying the minimums on the other credit card. And what that allows you to do is move through paying off these credit cards and you're starting to see like one credit card's completely paid off, you're moving to the next one. It's not quite as efficient as the avalanche method, but it's the difference is not that much. And the fact is, if you can use either one of them to propel you to pay down your credit card debt, I highly recommend.
Okay. Thank you. I personally enjoy the avalanche method.
Yeah, and like I said, it is the more efficient one, but
Yeah.
some people like seeing that balance, go to zero. It motivates them.
Encouraging. It really is.
Yeah,
It does
sure.
Um, and so we're going to transition on to savings. Jada Rashawn asks, how much of your income should you be saving and for how long?
Okay, another great question. So when it comes to saving, the first thing I'm always a big proponent of paying down credit card debt and creating an emergency fund. Those are like the two first things that I recommend. So we've addressed a little bit of the credit card debt. When it comes to an emergency fund, I like people to work towards 3 months of expenses for their emergency fund.
Okay.
I like that kept in a separate savings account, usually a high yield savings account. And we're in a very low interest rate environment right now. So the yield on that is not going to be much, but it'll be something rather than just sitting in a savings account that pays you nothing on it. Marcus by Goldman Sachs has a very good high yield savings account that you might want to look at.
Okay.
But creating that emergency fund for 3 months of expenses, it takes so much pressure off. You find that you're in a situation where potentially your employer loses their job, and now you're a little bit unsure of whether, and especially during COVID, I know that this has happened to nannies where either they've lost their job, and I've heard some stories about that, or they've seen sort of the trauma that's gone on in some of the families where their jobs were in trouble, which means that your job is potentially in trouble as a nanny. So if you're sitting with those 3 months there, yeah, of course, there's going to be stress around a potential job loss, and it's not even a job loss. It could be anything. Your car breaks down, or any of these expenses that were unplanned for that just happen as a part of life. Knowing that you have that money, it gives you a sense of confidence in your day-to-day routine. That's going to make you feel like these problems that come at you, they can be dealt with, and you know that it's there, and you can always rebuild that emergency fund afterwards. Now, when it comes down to how much you should be saving as part of the question, it really depends on the person and what your goals are. Once again, back to that, though, there is a rule of thumb that's out there that some people use, especially when they're first getting started, and it's the 50-30-20 rule.
Okay.
And that idea is to have 50% of your salary go towards your needs. 30% of your salary go towards your wants, and 20% go towards savings. And so to the extent that you can, and 20% of your salary going to savings is quite substantial. And so maybe you won't get to the 20%. Maybe your needs are a little bit higher than 50% of what you have coming in, and that's fine. But it's a good template to start if you're just starting to consider how much you should be saving and spending.
Absolutely. Wow. I think I may have only heard of that, the 50-30-20%, maybe once, but I hadn't thought about it that way. That's really.
And I was just going to add, let me just add something as well. One trick that I've had and I've used with clients, and sometimes it helps them, because there's the idea of how much I should be budgeting. And then there's like, how do I budget? Like, how do I keep myself from using the money that I've, put into this budget? That's that emotional, stuff that we all end up having to deal with. And one little trick that I've used in the past with clients, and it's worked quite well, is to have 3 separate accounts. So 2 separate checking accounts. You just want to make sure that you're not paying fees on these accounts. Certain banks will charge fees on certain checking accounts. Excuse me. So, but have 2 checking accounts. One checking account is going to be for your income and your needs, right? So anything that has to be paid gets paid out of that account.
Right.
You take the money that you've addressed for your wants, goes into the other checking account. So you know that that's what you're dealing with all month. And then whatever you've decided to save goes into your savings account. And it's a really easy way to see that needs, wants, savings, and to keep track of it.
Absolutely. Something I told you in our first consultation was that it might be a little bit excessive, but I literally have, I think, like 10 accounts. And I separated all of them and I gave
Right,
all a name because of that emotional component. I'm like, food is going here.
right, right.
And just all of those sorts of things just to keep me on track. It really does help
And
me.
it's whatever works for you. You know, the idea is just let's get the ball moving down the field. So, I'm posing some suggestions and hopefully they're helpful for people. But my overall goal is to make sure that you're working on your your overall financial wellness. And however you get there is fine. It's whatever works for you. And I think sometimes we overthink these things. And it's like, am I doing this the right way? Well, if you're doing it at all, you're doing it the right way.
That is awesome. Thank you. That you're very encouraging, which
That's great. Well, I'm the eternal optimist.
yes. Okay. And I think those are all of the questions that I received for this episode.
Awesome.
I wanted to say, one, it was a privilege having you. Um, and I said that I would have some like announcements or some surprises for the Nanny Chats community. So there are about three of them. One is that Warren Berger and myself will be doing a series on finances. So this was just a snippet of what's to come. We will cover all of our basis, nannies, and so that includes insurance, and that also includes investments, retirement plans, 401k or Roth IRA, like you name it. He is going to tackle it for us, which is so generous of him. Also, if you have been struggling during this pandemic, there are two grants that are available or becoming available that you can apply for, and there are no strings attached. So that means that you can utilize this for your bills, or you could even put it towards that savings that we were speaking about. The first one is from the Nanny Relief Fund. So if you go to the nannyrelieffund.org, you can sign up for that. Also, it's the National Domestic Workers Alliance. And it doesn't matter what your status is, there's no judgment. We know that there are nannies that have been paid on the books, who have been paid off the books. They have taken care of it all. It's a grant, so it's money that you don't have to pay back. And that's all for today. Thank you so much for coming.
It's absolutely my pleasure. And I would just add also, Brittany, if anyone is interested in contacting me
Yes.
for a complimentary 30-minute consultation, they're welcome to reach out to me at luminaryfinancialadvisors.com. Even if we're not a fit necessarily for my services, I'm happy to steer people in the right direction.
Absolutely. Please go and contact him. He is incredible and will steer you in the right direction. So, and can you say that again? It's
luminaryfinancialadvisors.com.
Advisors.com. Thank you so much, Warren. And
it's been my absolute pleasure, and good luck to all the nannies out there for sure.
come on back, guys, every Sunday. Nanny Chats. Bye.